GGTOW versus MGTOW. Round 1. Fight! Hey MGTOW YouTube, it's Prince of Queens. I don't know how many of you are aware of my channel, but I remember Turd Flinging Monkey commenting under one of my videos once upon a time, so I know he's at least watched me before. That said, I want to preface this video by saying that GGTOWs are not necessarily ideologically opposed to MGTOWs, and in fact, a huge portion of people identifying with or advocating for the GGTOW label are probably mostly in agreement with MGTOWs ideologically, though usually with less general disdain for females. Probably because most of us have never been in relationships with them. So, in case you don't even know what I'm talking about, the brief definition of GGTOW is very simple. It's gay men who choose to prioritize the needs of themselves as individuals and also the greater community and demographic of gay men, more than other things. They are not prioritizing the needs of lesbians, bisexual people, trans people, or straight women. They are deciding that, for the most part, they don't really care what happens to them. Because GGTOWs don't have to. They're gay guys. My friend R.Cat's Gay coined the phrase, and it's actually starting to go viral, at least on a small scale. Recently, I had a chance to talk with a guy I know named Chadwick Moore, editor at Dangerous.com, who you might remember from his regular appearances on Tucker Carlson. He had this to say about GGTOW.
I don't know if I agree with the general message of the LGBT, so I personally just started making videos and separated myself from it naturally. But I still have lesbians and trans people as friends. But then a number of my friends on YouTube started saying, well, I don't hang out with them ever. I just hang out with my husband, period. And one of my friends in particular said, we should have a name for this because this is something that's already happening. And he ended up coming up with GGTOW, gays going their own way. What do you think of
that? Well, I mean, I do remember watching your video on this, but the original MGTOW is about men going their way. MGTOW is about men checking out of basically monogamy, marriage, starting families because of feminism.
And there's all sorts of different versions of it. Is the thing,
yeah.
Like there's,
but it's basically it's sort of like men checking out of society, and it's mostly like a conservative libertarian thing, but men checking out of pursuing women basically and starting families because of the evils and horrors of feminism and because of what could happen to them if they
and they're
have children and then get divorced and get all the money taken away and whatever else, right?
And they're defying their own nature as like sexual beings.
Yeah, but if you're MGTOW, you're basically, no offense to MGTOWers, but from what I understand is you're basically playing video games and hiring prostitutes, and that's your life. But it's true. They're not like, oh, I'm just going to be a stallion. It's from what I understand, I could be wrong, and correct me if I'm wrong, any of your viewers, but from what I understand is it's sort of, I mean, it's a very sort of deeply seated in, it's only reactionary to feminism with no sort of solution. It's not like I'm going to go out and have sex with every woman that I can and just be the stallion. I'm going to retreat from society.
Yeah.
So GGTOW isn't exactly that. How you, as you're describing it, it's more of, it's not saying you want to check out from relationships and monogamy as much as
no, not at all.
Yeah. So
that's why it's not even a spin-off. It's entirely different, really. It's because it's like, it's not saying I'm a gay guy that's not going to have other relationships with gay guys. It's like, no, I'm a gay guy. I have no reason to be a feminist. Leave me alone.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know what? Yes, and I think that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of gay men who absolutely agree with you and who would jump on board. But I would say I think you need to give it a new name because it sounds like gay celibacy, like MGTOW, or like I'm just going to hire prostitutes.
But
because it's totally different Like the
No, but
I'll cut it off there, the part where I go, but, because while my comeback was actually fairly decent, he makes a good point, in that due to the name being so similar to MGTOW, it could potentially confuse a lot of people, which I knew from the beginning when I told Our Cat's Gay that I approved of this branding of the movement. However, I chose to endorse it anyway, mainly because I knew it was catchy, even though I don't officially define as a GGTOW personally, and even though I knew it would have a potential negative association with MGTOW. You see, for the most part, outside of people who watch right-wing, MRA, ANCAP, and libertarian YouTube videos constantly, almost nobody has ever even heard of MGTOW. And I think maybe you've noticed by now that it's more than probably going to stay that way. However, GGTOW has the potential to be much, much more, and anybody who bothers to stop and think about that for a moment can figure it out. In fact, there's a lot of people out there, maybe the majority of our population, who could get introduced to the concept of MGTOW first after hearing about GGTOW, even though GGTOW kind of appropriated the label. I'll be blunt. GGTOW is better than MGTOW as a movement. GGTOW has staying power. GGTOW is realistic. GGTOW can break into normie land, and I think even MGTOWs can and should admit that, because if that happens, it will eventually draw attention to the issues MGTOWs bring up. MGTOW can't really go anywhere as a movement that isn't confined to the underground railroad of YouTube. Sure, there can always be endless guys who decide not to pursue relationships with women, and nobody can stop them from doing that. But they'll have to kind of quietly do that without really telling anybody that they have a very specific reason for doing it. Because once you say out loud that you're MGTOW, people stop hearing anything important. Obviously, the conversation with a MGTOW should be about, so this guy doesn't want to be in any sort of relationship with a woman at all, due to the fact that if he gets her pregnant, she practically owns him, and even if he doesn't knock her up, she could still lie and say he beat her or raped her just because she feels like it. She could, ruin his life for no reason. That's interesting that guys are not dating women at all. However, due to the fact that you are actively choosing to avoid relationships with women, it makes it altogether way too easy for your political opponents to say, well, he just backed out of relationships because he hates women, and he probably must be ugly. Why can't he be like one of those semi-nice MRAs? At least they sometimes have girlfriends. I'm sure you've heard similar things before. Now, I don't want you to stop calling yourselves MGTOWs. I don't want the few MGTOW channels that still exist to stop making content. And I don't think that you should stop advocating for sex robot technology. I also don't think that you should change your own personal patterns of relationships. You do you. What I do think is that you should start thinking about ways in which you could help the GGTOW movement get traction. Because, believe it or not, we're pretty pissed off too at this point. And I think that if things go the way that I think that they could, in a few years, GGTOW could enter the mainstream dialogue and cripple the feminist establishment in a way that MGTOW never can, but maybe always kinda wished that they could. Because if MGTOW is essentially boycotting the feminist system and hoping it reforms, GGTOW has the ability to challenge feminism on a public platform, potentially. And when it comes to a fair debate between GGTOWs and the intersectionals who try to control us, we'll obviously win. And if there's enough of us separating from and boycotting the LGBT, they can't ignore us forever. You see, MGTOW came as a result of feminists being crappy to men and demanding female entitlements from the male population that they didn't deserve, and then going on to ensure that all women had as easy of a time as possible being crappy to every man around them, to the point of entirely shaping the system to perpetuate that injustice. Which is how men now live in a female supremacist dystopia of a sort in the West. Yeah, that's messed up, and I really, really feel for you guys. And I will admit that overall, for the guys that have been directly the victims of this madness, you probably have it worse than gay men, and I will totally admit that. And totally understand why you'd go MGTOW. However, feminists made what I think will prove to be a fatal error when they grew a bit cocky and thought that they could make gay men bend the knee, which they seemingly thought that they could do simply because apparently a few lesbians in the 1980s cared for dying AIDS-infected gay men, which, according to the feminists of today, means that for the rest of eternity, feminism owns us. Which meant that in 2016, we had to be their soldiers for Hillary Clinton, which also meant that they got to own all of the non-profits and businesses and spaces associated with gay men, or at least control them because reasons, and if gay men objected, they would get banned from the places that they built. And then a lot of us said, "Nuh-uh, Jezebel, I don't even like you like that. I don't even like things like you." Furious, and as if they had already anticipated our reaction, the feminists tried everything they could to beat us into submission. They told us that all homophobia is rooted in misogyny, as if people are afraid of female pedophiles like they are with gay male pedophiles. They told us that our civil rights movement that started at the Stonewall riots was sparked by trans women of color. Which isn't just untrue, but is hilarious that they'd mention because one of the two, yes, two trans people that they were referring to ended up complaining about lesbian feminists taking over the gay scene in an interview in 1992, which you can watch in this video of mine that I'm showing here. Even worse, they tried to fabricate a narrative that gay men are obsessive booby gropers and that we frequently sexually assault women, which I address in depth in this video. Obviously, they were just trying to control us. I don't know what type of strategy it was. Regardless, while a lot of gay guys pretended to drink the Kool-Aid, at least on social media, and some of them truly believed that gay men are horrible patriarchal monsters that are as bad as those icky straight men, not all of us did. No, not only were there gay guys like Milo Yiannopoulos, who seemingly never had a whole bunch to do with the LGBT community, and then guys like Chadwick Moore, who, for the record, is so public that they are now putting him into an episode of Law and Order. No joke. Not only were there guys like that, but then there was me and my little YouTube channel, where I have gone into great detail about feminist history, theory, and contemporary feminist advocacy. Why it's wrong, why it harms men, how it harms gay men specifically, and most potently, why exactly gay men are living proof that feminist theory is entirely garbage, which is why they should have never messed with us. To be perfectly truthful, if feminists were a bit smarter and decided to leave gay men out of the patriarchy theory nonsense, I probably wouldn't have ever started my channel. I admit openly that if they didn't come for me and my community, I would have probably let them milk straight men for everything that you are worth and then fry up your carcasses into a steak. Yeah, gay men have a tendency to be selfish in that way, as it comes with the territory of being even more disliked than average men, by and large, so we learn to stick together and watch our own backs. But of course, that became impossible by around 2015 because feminists wouldn't even let us do that anymore. And then it was on, and I said, let me put on my glasses. I have some reading to do and videos to make. Soon enough, I wasn't alone. I have Arcad's Gay, Spacepan, and Feral Cat as fully homosexual men who feel essentially the exact same way about feminism and how they act towards gay men. Also, a guy named The Liberal Hammer, though he hasn't been super active on YouTube recently. We also have our friend Saint of Bacon, who is bisexual, and we do a weekly stream called The Gaytriarchy, which is currently hosted on Saint of Bacon's channel, but has a whole channel devoted to it. Eventually, we started attracting guys we didn't even know, and I now have a GGTOW playlist on my channel featuring some of those guys, including a guy in Sweden who actually brands his channel with GGTOW in it. He goes by GGTOW Berserker. And once the ball gets rolling, what's there to stop us? Are they gonna call us misogynists? Well, of course they are. But will it stick? Not really. You've seen what happens when they do it to Milo Yiannopoulos, because you can be a GGTOW or advocate for the GGTOW movement and be friends with as many women as you want, and not even have to change your dating habits. That's the beauty of it. It's no offense to women necessarily. It's simply an affirmation of what we already are as gay men, which I know for a fact that MGTOWs respect, at least some of them, because I've heard of them joking about being politically gay. All we are saying is that gay men have the right to care about gay men more than anybody else if we feel like it. Change my mind! That being said, do I want GGTOWs to fight the MGTOW community? No, I just want to make the distinction known. GGTOW is more viable of a movement than MGTOW, and you have to know it. You have to know perfectly well that if I could get on stage at MythCon or something, debating any feminist who isn't afraid of me about whether or not gay men are affected by patriarchy and whether or not gay men have a right to have the GGTOW movement, we all know I would annihilate that person. My friends all could too, and if you are interested in GGTOW specifically and how people are elaborating on it, check out Arcad's Gay and Feral Cat's new channel Burning Rainbow, which goes into depth about theories and ideas surrounding the movement. Look, MGTOWs, I don't need you guys to think that GGTOW is better than you, because how does one even quantify who is better as people? People go to MGTOW for complicated reasons, whereas GGTOW is largely just common sense. But if you guys won't admit that you see my point that GGTOW can go much further, I might be a little annoyed. Yeah, maybe, kinda. So let me know what you think.